Welcome to the Real Recovery Show. We air every Friday at noon, and we're super excited about all the feedback we've been getting. We've had 30 episodes now, and it's amazing interviewing people, all walks of life, same affliction, same addiction, same internal struggles. And it's so amazing that when you're in recovery, that when you focus on the similarities, how you can see the light. And that when your mind is closed and your heart is closed, how all you'll see is just a mirror of whatever it is you brought to the table, whatever it is that you're thinking. And it's so easy to use every experience that we have as an opportunity to strengthen our addiction or to strengthen our recovery. And even if we aren't using or doing anything to overtly escape the present moment and avoid listening to our own internal truth, we could still be very much in addiction without acting out. And so this has become a daily walk. All the energy that we put into our addiction becomes the energy and the focus that we put into our recovery. But now our energy is getting matched by a power that's way greater than us. And there are things that we get to experience and people we get to help that will blow our former addict mind's mind. And the best part is being able to break a chain and then to go to someone else with the clippers and to help them break their chain. So welcome. As with all episodes, it is recommended to listen for the similarities and not the differences. And to see how any story that we might have had about how if I had this, I wouldn't be an addict, or if I went through that, I wouldn't be an addict, that we can shed those stories and see what's really driving the bus for us. So today I'm super excited. I'm going to be interviewing Brandon Novak, who is in town actually for Black Monday, which is an event that Tin High, No Hero and Heroin puts on every year. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and more people are going to have tables there, and it's or have tables there every year, and they have a speaker, and it's just a powerful way to get the message out and to break the stigma about all different forms of addiction, and in this way, more specifically, heroin addiction. And so that is every year on Monday. Today's Friday, so it was just this past Monday, and they're just really powerful. So if you haven't heard about it ever before, definitely make sure you hit that up every year. And Brandon Novak, if you do know of him, you might not know about him from his story around addiction, or you might know his story around addiction, but maybe not recovery. You may know him from the series, the Jackass films, or Viva La Bam. You may know him because you're into skateboarding and all of his amazing accomplishments and what he ended up doing from a very early age as a professional skateboarder. You may know him from his books that he wrote, or that he was a CKY, or is crew member. Anyway, but whatever it is, what we're here to talk about today is whatever comes to mind to share openly, honestly, and deeply about what addiction really looks like, and how and what stops each of us from making that conscious final shift to put that energy into our sobriety, our recovery. And so, as we do with all episodes, we start off talking about where it all started, our childhoods a little bit, and what it was like growing up. And I have some questions, but I'm going to turn this over to you now, Brandon, so you could start off telling us a little bit about your childhood, about your parents, about what the climate was mentally for you in your childhood. So, welcome.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. This is a really beautiful movement or mission that's happening here in Vegas surrounding the Black Monday deal, if you will. And I loved how you opened this segment. It was very elegantly stated, focusing on the similarities as opposed to the differences, which was and having these new experiences that would blow our former addict mind. And that's beautiful. And it's so true. And that alludes and attests to my story. Is I'm a guy that after 22 years of active alcoholism and addiction, walking into my 13th inpatient treatment center, I could no longer look back and justify or minimize the severity of my disease of addiction and alcoholism. And I couldn't deny that I was the common denominator in my problem. And if I just maybe got out of my way, I could actually stand a chance. And what I had been doing for so many years was just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. And my ship sank every time without fail. And so ultimately it was the last thing I tried, which happened to be the first thing that worked for me.
Yeah.
Ending up in a 12-step fellowship and having an amazing sponsor who allowed me to experience those 12 steps in my fellowship that allowed me to have this spiritual experience. And the definition of a spiritual experience is simply a psychic change.
Yeah.
Meaning what you started with the beginning of this. I no longer think today, with coming up on 8 years of sobriety, think how I thought walking into that 13th inpatient treatment center. My brain has been rewired, and I look at things in a completely different manner, in a different fashion, and in a different light. And it truly blows my addict mind.
It's so interesting too, is I watched something that you did on YouTube, and in it you mentioned about how, here you had this mother who was, what does your mom do again? She's a
nuclear physicist.
Physicist. She's a nuclear physicist, and you have this, this attention, this focus, this, I'm not going to let anything stand in my way from doing whatever I need to do. And then you have your father and all the stuff with addiction and the stuff that you were dealing with him. And this is what's so crazy about addiction to me. It's that, because I was afflicted with this too, it's that we have this mentality in our society that by sheer determination, motivation, and force, that if you have the right mindset, you could do anything. And while that's positive and it's great to have a solution-oriented, go-getter attitude, sometimes the very mind that is so, I'm going to do this, I'm going to put my mind to it, me, I got this, that same identity, that same drive can't be wrong, can't need help, can't be humble, and I had the same thing. I steamrolled through my life, accomplished things at a very early age than anybody else, 3 years of school in the same year, first house when I was 21, stuff like that. And then crashed, and then got up, and then crashed, and then got up and crashed, because this need to be, to just motivate myself and to just be driven. And it's amazing, because when you think about, the highs and then the lows, I've also been homeless. I've also been drugs and alcohol's bitch. I've also gone through that. I've had so many different addictions, and they had me. And yet I got this, because I need to believe I got this, because somehow if I don't got this, and I would look at all the things I accomplished as proof that I got this, and I would not, and you even mentioned this in one of your video, I would black out all the bad things that happened and excuse them off.
Yeah, because that doesn't play in favor of my alcoholism.
Right.
If I'm recognizing and understanding and aware of the severity of my situation, which is alcoholism, the last thing that it wants to see is the reality of the situation, right? That's why I drank and drug for so many years, was to to escape from this reality that I had created for myself. That was the solution to my problem. And then all of a sudden I'd have these brief moments of sobriety and this moment of clarity. And at that very moment, I'm like, fuck, I'm like a stranger in my own skin trying to figure out who let me in and why. So I need to return back to my solution at all costs, which is, you know, right. and then I inject a speedball, or I sniff a line, I hit the pipe, I drink the bottle, and immediately that release and that separation from my body, which is the biggest problem in the world, takes place, and all is right with the world again.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up with alcoholism and addiction, and my second job in my mind was this preoccupation that I didn't want to be like my parents. In my case, both my parents were addicts, differently in form, but they both were checked out, and I just didn't want to be like them. And, you know, when you grow up and you're around somebody and you're focusing on what you don't want to be like, while at the same time putting all this energy into being what you think you should be, it's like the mind is so powerful and it's holding on to the blueprint of what I don't want while it's being written what I do want, and I'm having two lives that completely conflict with each other, and whatever I build up over here, I'm going to tear down here because I can't help to be, unless I have help, what my programming is designed to do. And, you know, genetics or nature versus nurture or whatever included, here you have a father who was in addiction. What kind of addiction?
He liked crack. He was an uppers guy.
Okay.
Alcohol, crack, coke.
Yeah, I went down. I wasn't so much
too.
up. Yeah. I was like down, out, anywhere but here. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I didn't want to be like hyper alert and sensitive. So I was not friendly with my surroundings. I wanted to escape at all costs.
Right. Right. When I was a stripper for most of the 90s, and I was the soberest person in the bar because they saw me during the day, because I'd be like this control freak, and I'm like, nobody's touching me unless I don't want them to touch me, and I'd be making the money and whatever, and I start off really good, and then towards the middle of the day I'd be thinking, okay, what am I gonna do? Okay, what time is it now? Can't wait to get off. And then people would stop being people and just money suppliers, and then I'd go to wherever I needed to go to get whatever I needed to get, and rinse and repeat. And so it's crazy, but thank God there's a solution. So was your father in your life your whole childhood, or?
He was around just enough to let us know that he wasn't around, if that makes sense.
So your mom kind of was like a single parent?
Absolutely. She held the household together. She was the one that showed up through thick and thin, and remained present throughout all of our lives. And I understand love and how conflicted and convoluted that can be, and powerful as well. And, you know, I really, really, for many years, until I found the solution, if you will, and got into the work and figured out my part in the process. But for many years, I disliked that, man. I actually excelled at everything I did to prove that I would never become that man. Ooh. And skateboarding actually raised me. My mother and skateboarding really kind of taught me the fundamentals of life, and actually followed over to sobriety, unbeknownst to me at the time, but I see it now. And I'd be out skating, and I'd come home after we'd just packed up a house in the middle of the night and ran. After my mother sold a house, and we ran. We were always running and hiding from him. And then I would come home, and he'd just be in the kitchen making dinner as if nothing ever happened. And that was kind of a reoccurring theme. So that was pretty frustrating to me at the time.
When did he die, or is he still alive?
No, And asking timelines to me is not you're not going to get a great outcome. life was a blur for like many years, like legit. I'd say maybe 25-ish to 28-ish. I'm 44 now.
Okay. Okay, it's not that important. I get the gist.
Yeah. But we went from a father to I loved my father, and I love him now. And after again doing that work and understanding the situation and seeing it for what it really was, without my alcoholic brain creating these delusional narratives that aren't even real.
Right.
He was a man that was a sick man that did the best that he could with what he had.
Yeah.
But our life looked like this together. Father, named Jerome, who I loved. And then he would go out, and he was a great cook. And when he didn't come home to make dinner at night, and we heard him and his bike, because he was in the Hells Angels, and him and his biker buddies would pull up to the house at like 4 a.m, and we'd hear the bikes, and we'd shake like leaves because we didn't know who was walking through that door, but it wasn't my father, who I loved. And so like I live with that after school special, that cautionary tale of what a drink or a drug could psychologically do to an individual. And create this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde scenario. Yeah. So therefore, I for many years, it was a father I loved, alcoholic, drug addict that I hated.
Right. The Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, and then he was gone for long enough, but he was always. Then he was like full blown in his addiction, which I was as well. So then we became drug dealer, drug buyer. I'd sell to him, he'd sell to me. Consumer.
Wow.
And then it became like party buddies for a little bit, where we would just get high and sit at a table and get high together. And then at the end, it was the last time I saw him, we fist fought in the middle of the street one night, because we're both now living with my mother. He's strung out, I'm strung out, and we're just both really sick. And I caught him like climbing through the window one night, and I like pushed him back out the window. And next thing I know, we're in the middle of the street fighting at like 3 a.m. My mother's calling the police. He's saying to never use my last name again. Very sick.
It's really interesting, because here it is that your mother is married to somebody who she's already having this experience with, and she has you, and then she ends up having similar experiences with you. But maybe she grew up also in some sort of addiction or dysfunction or anything to have that sense of normal enough to be in that. Have you ever gone that? I mean, not to talk about your mother, but just to...
No, it's cool. I never dug that deep into her past. Her father and mother were not. So genetically speaking, I don't believe she was predisposed. I don't know.
I mean, from a codependency perspective, because I looked at my parents and I was like, all right, why are you guys together? And why was all this happening? And it was helpful to me because, like you said, you got to a place where you saw that he was sick. I needed to see my parents as what they went through and what they were holding on to, so that I could finally let go of taking some of the stuff that I went through so personally.
Sure. And now, what I can say that I do know for certain is that I used that to my advantage for many years in active addiction, because after my mother finally had enough of my father and put him out, I would then play this card with my mother. Well, if you didn't marry my father, I wouldn't be the heroin addict that I've become. So essentially, it's your fault. So how dare you try to throw me out of this house? How dare you not give me $20? I would just really use that to my advantage for many, many years thereafter. So I found that to be true through working through this trauma. And then the other thing that I learned is that, there's something to be said as to why I'm a 44-year-old single man that lives with 3 cats. And that's because, I've done a lot of, I love these spiritual retreats, and I'm always kind of digging deeper into the why behind my deal, and something at a young age that wasn't even gnarly, that is really a pretty matter-of-fact thing that happened with my father and I, this brief exchange with words at that very moment. allow me to define the moment in my life where I said that I would never be vulnerable with anybody ever again. Now, if it's a stranger, an audience, a room of 10,000, no problem. But if it's intimate and it's a one-on-one, and like, I refuse to do that. And I asked my mentor at the time, the spiritual advisor I had, why I remember that. And he said, well, that's because it's your brain is only able to accept that. It's not ready to go deeper to figure out like what really happened.
Plus what I found out, because I had the same thing, is that it's almost like an imprint that acts as a representative for that whole thought system. So like I had it too, something that seems
like the placeholder.
The placeholder, exactly. So I had this seemingly inconsequential thing happen, but it had so much loaded into it that it became the representative in my mind for why that's it. I'm never going to let anybody ever. I'm never going to be vulnerable again. I'm never going to let anybody in like that. I'm going to have everybody at an arm's distance, and that's it. And I did that for years because of that. So that's pretty profound. I actually forgot about that. That I know I made decisions at a very young age about the rest of my life. You know, and if you got to think about it, like, you know, what do you know at like 6 or 7 or 8 years old that you are so equipped to be able to like know the rest of your life, this is the tool I need to be okay? And that's why they say that when you start using drugs or alcohol, you stop developing in those areas because one of the decisions we make is, I need this to be okay. And this is just it. Like, and then we're never going to ask that again. Is it really true? Or is it possible I could do something different? Nope, that's a fact. We're going to put that in the fact folder. And this is now our solution, you know? And so don't ever talk about that, because if you talk about that, there's something wrong with you. You don't know, you know? And so, I mean, I did a lot of research to know what I know, and then you don't know. And
that's what, as I said, as you're saying that, I was thinking, and the older I get and the longer I stay sober, which oddly enough, I'm acquiring all this information and
but
this
the less we
knowledge
know
that I know, but ultimately it's just fucking the less that I know.
Right.
I literally, and the easier my life becomes at that point.
Right. It's so silly because even in our society, like, set aside addiction, people spend so much time trying to learn more, be more, do more, have more, whatever, and then there's this whole unlearning and letting go and not attaching and stuff like that. Like, that's just a normal person.
Totally. And we're just kind of blessed to have the awareness and understanding that it's so much deeper. But that was when the moment that I secured this ultimate victory is when I admitted complete defeat. Yeah. Right. And that's at that moment. And it all became as a direct result of the pain. The pain had finally become so fucking unbearable. Not unmanageable. Unmanageable is like a Monday morning.
Right.
But it became so unbearable that for the first time in my life, I was willing to become open-minded just long enough to say that my way clearly doesn't fucking work, because I'm walking into this 13th treatment center begging to God for a pair of underwear, literally. And there's this 19-year-old tech who's taking me downstairs to the basement of this donations room, and he's handing me women's clothes and shoes that did not fit. And I'm so grateful that he found these articles of clothing. And like, that's where I end up.
Yeah, and then you didn't bring, for the first time maybe, or maybe for the first time in a deeper way, you didn't bring your whole resume with you. You know, like, don't you know who I think I am? Did you not see what I did? Like, I don't need to be here using this clothing. Like, you need to find something else for me. Yeah.
And completely open-minded and willing to follow your suggestions, which is not what I do.
Right.
Because my resume states and my resume states that I possess this job that consists of knowing everything.
Right.
So thank you so kindly, Lisa, for suggesting what I could ultimately do to save my life. Right. But this is where I suggest that you should fuck off.
Right. Exactly.
Because I know.
Yeah, because nowhere in this are you.
Because I'm focusing only on the differences, not the similarities.
Right. Because we have to. It's amazing how much energy gets devoted and invested to keeping that going. It is exhausting. And
it is.
The result of keeping the addictive mindset going is so is so self-defeating that it uses all resources, that it puts you in a corner and it talks to you and says, now you have a hard life and nobody understands you. So I'm your friend. I know what you need. I know where you need to go to get it. And I know when you need to go do it. And it's the thinking, but it's the last place we're going to look, So
that was literally, a lot of things. I believe in alignment, and everything has to align in order to create a particular or desired outcome. And then that the alignment's not up to me, right? The universe, the God, whatever you choose to call it. But at 38 years old, on this particular day, for me, it was May 25th, 2015, I was divinely inconvenienced in just such a manner that the God of my understanding showed up, and he created just a big enough gap between me and the last speedball that I shot into my arm to allow me to have that moment of clarity to see what my life really looked like was. And at that fucking moment, for the first time in my life, I was no longer accepting of it. Right? It just was
it's
not
a tipping point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the thing is, for me, one of the big things that happened is that voice, that alcoholic brain that I possess, that talks to me in my own voice, that makes me believe the unbelievable. Exactly what you just said. Here, have this drink, take this dope, and I know where to get it, and it'll make everything better. Literally, the drink and the drug stopped working.
Yeah.
And that was a big portion as to why I threw the talent.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't, I swear to God, no matter how much I fucking loaded up on that rig, if I'd fill it if I put another drop of water on it, the plunger would come out and I couldn't even use the needle effectively. Like I was filling it up. And no matter how much I'd shoot up, that delusional effect was no longer being created that would allow me to escape my reality.
Right.
To then make this undesirable, fucking disgusting life become not only tolerable but desirable. Right. And that it's no longer happening. So no matter how much dope I shot or wine I drank, I was no longer allowed to escape my reality, which meant that I was having that moment of clarity, sober and high, and it was fucking. That's the worst
experience. I know exactly what that feels like. It's that was it. There's nothing like being awake through trying to be asleep. And it's interesting because in cinematography there's a term called suspension of disbelief. And whenever somebody goes to make a movie or anything, they try their best on all parts of it, whether it's the acting, the writing, the scenery, the clothing, the effects, whatever, to engage the viewer so much that they will let go of the awareness enough that they are in the seat watching it and just be in it. And if the acting's not good, or the writing's really bad, or the storyline is not really consistent or feasible, or the effects or whatever, that the mind will wake up enough, and to the degree that the mind wakes up is the less engaged in it, in whatever it is, and that's whether or not they're going to even enjoy it and stuff. And so in our lives, it's like we have this this fixation on our story, our projection of who we think we need to be, what we think is going on, and we continue that. And if certain things don't happen, and this is why everybody has a different bottom in form, because if certain things don't happen, I could have things happen in my life that would clearly be somebody else's bottom by far, but yet for me it's not. But certain things need to happen, and then there's this tipping point where okay is no longer okay. And you said in your video that I watched that you went to travel with your best friend Bam, right? And then you ended up bringing heroin, and then you ended up being kicked out. You went home, and good news, Mom, I'm here, and I'm here to help you again. And she's like, they called me, I know, and standing in the doorway, or I imagine that you're standing in the doorway. I might have added that. And then the look in her eyes and what had happened. And it seems like that was, if not the moment, something that clicked for you? Because here was your mom, who was in some ways your role model or hero, right? Is that when you had that okay to not okay moment?
That was such an insequential moment in time, right? Like me being kicked off a tour for my drug abuse was a Monday morning.
Right.
Like like that was just the deal.
Right.
And showing up at my mom's house, creating this narrative a Monday morning. But, you know, I got to a point where in my life, I never believed I'd get to. And B, I just got tired. I got so tired of my own voice. I got so tired of playing this game of chess that only existed in my mind and trying to play each person.
It is exhausting.
With the exact move that will correlate with the next move. And when I looked in her eyes, and I had already done some things in life that people would accredit to success and happiness and really, like, you've arrived. And now I'm standing back on her, literally, and you called it right. I was on her doorstep in Baltimore City, in Little Italy, in this little row home, and I'm standing there, and she'd always lock the door like Fort Knox. She's this older woman that lives by herself in the city, and I knock, and normally she'd open the door and a smile, and this little old lady, and that day there was no smile. It was just a look of, like, not disgust, but like, just, you let me down. You hurt me. And she didn't even have to say much. You know, when less is more, and that day less was fucking more. And I just, like, I was tired. I was done. And it was just, yet again. So therefore, I don't ever look at any attempts at trying to find sobriety as a failure.
Right.
Whether I got loaded in the facility, whether I AMA'd to go get high, whether I stayed sober for a week, whatever it is, because these seeds, unbeknownst to me, were being planted all along the way. Right. And it was at that moment where it was like these seeds just, like, sprouted like they were on fucking meth or angel dust. They just, in the blink of an eye, they fully grown. And I could see my part in everything. And everything that they said to me in every one of those attempts, it just rang true, and it was in my face, and it was so clear and concise that, like, I am the problem, and, like, I continue to create these situations and outcomes, and if I just fucking take some suggestions and follow advice from these other people. So therefore, when I after that day, which was externally so far from what my previous bottoms looked like. Like, my previous bottoms looked like me standing on the corner of Eastern Avenue and Patterson Park in Baltimore City, allowing men to blow me to get more money to buy more heroin. Like, eating out of trash cans, like, sleeping in abandoned houses. Those are my bottoms. This day, I had just been kicked off a tour from Australia. I'm standing on her stoop in Baltimore. I have a pocket full of money. My prediction of the future is I'm going to get really high for a long period of time and not be bothered. This is going to be amazing. And she just said a few simple words that literally cut me like a fucking dagger that I'll never forget. And it just, it clicked, you know.
What did she say?
She just said, Brandon, I can no longer love you to death. Like, you cannot stay here. You can't be here. You have to go. And I didn't try to talk my way out of it or walk it back. All I said to her in complete transparency, I looked at her and I just said, do you love me? Do you still love me? And she said, I love you, but I will no longer love you to death. You have to go. And then, so after achieving those successful things in my life, talk about a full circle moment, right? Now I've burnt every bridge known to man. I'm 38 years old. I'm back where it all began in Baltimore City. You know, I've been in these movies that break box office records. I'm a New York Times selling author who's written an autobiography, addiction memoir, pro skater. Now I'm a 38-year-old homeless heroin addict sleeping in abandoned houses back in Baltimore City. And like, that outcome was no longer accepting to me. And I knew that I had created this outcome. And I'm not even sober at this point, but I started to become accountable for my actions, right? Like, I started to work that fourth step while I'm sleeping in this park and I wake up with a rat on my chest. Like, I put me here. Like, and it, again, my life, what I've learned is all in retrospect. Live forward and learn backwards. And at that moment, still caught up in active alcoholism and addiction, I could look back and see every part that I played that landed me here. And I knew where the solution was. And that's, you know, the very, you know, that's not the beginning of my process. My process began.
Right. You know, it's kind of funny, that whole idea anyway, because a lot of times people think that their sobriety starts when they step foot in a rehab or they step foot in a in a room. And actually, what we end up finding out, sometimes at first, sometimes much later, is that, you know, life was always in session. You know, we were that spirit having the human experience, but we were so focused on the human experience, blotting out the spirit. But yet the lessons were there, the realizations were there, the experience was always affected in some way. Like, the fact that I had things that conflicted internally with, like, the who I really am and the who I think I am, was one of the reasons I was uncomfortable in my own skin. I mean, in addition to some of the shitty stories I had that I kept like as if they were gold, but I really truly believe that we have two experiences at the same time. We have our spiritual deep soul experience, and then we have our who we think we are, personality, self-image, egoic perspective, and, you know, very much body identified side of us. And so the bottoms that we have inform, you know, it's the awarenesses that come, the experiences, that eventually we get to a place where it ends up coming together and the soul goes, okay, now, you know, and the life that we were living and the things we were identifying with and the things that we thought were going to make us happy or were going to make us safe, they don't feel like they do that anymore. And we start taking responsibility for our life, and we start realizing our part, that we are the common denominator. But the awakening process was happening way before, even in the moments when I was on my knees begging and pleading and crying, you know, no more. I wrote poems to myself, you know, begging me not to do it again, you know, and yet I couldn't stop because, you know, I love how you shared this. How do you say it? Where you say it's just business. You know, I have no choice. If addiction calls, addiction comes first, because how I feel in my own skin and what I think I need to do to take care of myself is going to say what it needs, and that's it. And it's not personal, and it has nothing to do with anybody or anything, and it doesn't even care about what I really want either. It'll throw it all away for it. And then on the other side of it, sobriety says, so guess what? If you want real sobriety, it has to come first, no matter what. It has to be just as first as addiction was. It has to come first, because anything you put before your sobriety, before your recovery, you're going to lose. And it may be that you still even physically have it, but you won't feel like you do. And you won't be able to appreciate it or experience that you're okay having it. You could be in the relationship, but now it sucks. You know, the job, but now it sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. But I wear a lot of different hats, and one of those hats is helping people get help. And people will call me and they're like, you know, I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic. I know that. But I'm about to get this job, and this job is like, it's going to do it. It's going to straighten things out. I'm like, no, it's fucking not. You get the job. Now you're just a heroin addict with a job. Great fucking job. Like,
now you're just a heroin addict with a job.
Straight up. And I call it exactly like I see it. It's
That's
like,
awesome.
it's just, I'm like, that's awesome. You're just going to prolong the inevitable. and I'll hear from you 6 months down the road. But, and something that my mentor taught me in the beginning, procrastination is like masturbation. You will only fuck yourself. So while you're this heroin addict with a job that seems very put together on the outside, you go to bed with you. Like, my life is going to go on. I am going to sleep peacefully. My bills will be paid. I will be accountable to my loved ones. I'm dependable. All that stuff that sobriety gives us. Like, and just know that when and if you're ready, you know, I will be here. But yeah, I love those guys, and I was those guys, so I get it. It makes, like, I'm great at devil's advocate because there's not much I haven't seen, tried, or did to make it through another day. So I love the people that are going to get the things that are going to straighten them out, or the ones that have a plan, because I had a lot of plans.
Right. We all have excuses too, where we say, you know, if I had a job, or I have, or paradoxically, I have the job, I have the responsibility, I have the kids. Oh my God, if I just had it easier, if I didn't have all these responsibilities.
Good luck.
It would be so good, and then I could get sober. It's like,
well, I was thinking that when you were opening this up, you know, the assets become the defects, right? Like, if I just had to bring it a break, then I could go to treatment and get this, and then right, we find sobriety and recovery, and then those defects become the assets. It's really, it's all a contradictory mind fuck, right?
It is.
How I lived my life prior to sobriety was to fight was to win, to fight was to survive, to fight was necessity, to fight was to make it through another day. And then I come into sobriety, and to fight is to lose. To fight is to die. To fight is to drink. So it's like a complete...
Right. Because when we do that, we separate ourselves. We make ourselves terminally unique. We cut ourselves off from...
Yeah, you said it.
Our
so
intuition.
Internally unique. Like, you don't understand my pain. You can't help me because you didn't do what I did or saw what I've seen. And that... knowing what I know today is just my alcoholism, like on angel dust, like just full force, like da-da-da-da-da. You know, and I didn't understand any of this until I understood it, and I had to come in and get into the work. And it all, the success that I've been blessed with today has all come from me finally accepting that I had no idea about anything. It was so easy that I missed it.
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, my dad was super intelligent. He was, I guess, a functioning alcoholic. Smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day, pills, alcohol, food addiction, etc., workaholism, sex addiction, yada yada yada. But I wanted to be a functioning alcoholic. I don't know. I venerated intelligence. I believed in his arrogance. He was very arrogant. And I just thought that I just didn't know enough, didn't do enough, didn't have enough. And if I could just find the missing thing that I don't know. And I felt like, and we used to say this years ago in recovery, I don't ever hear this anymore, but like, that other people had the manual for living, you know, and I had to figure it out. Oh, you know, and I just felt like that. I felt like other people somehow had normal and I had no idea. I would always swing past normal in these extremes. I would always be, you know, wanting something and clinging to it and driving and doing all the things, or then I would swing past normal and I would isolate and I would be high and I would be, you know, dying, and then I would be like, okay, and then I would start again, and it was just, but I never knew how to live life. And it's in recovery that we get, in essence, the manual for living on how to work with the flow of life rather than against it. Like you said, you know, we quit fighting everyone and everything. We have to.
Well, that's, you know, in talking to you, it's not easy. It's very easy for me to see that you don't lack the understanding, the intelligence, the knowledge of the topics that we're discussing, right? Like, that's very fucking apparent to me.
Yeah.
And this kind of correlates with my belief with alcoholism and addiction and the people that are in our 12-step fellowships, right? I don't believe that any of us have gotten here because we took the short bus to school.
Right.
It's actually quite the contrary. I'm a firm believer that we get here because we're too smart for our own fucking good. Mm-hmm. Right? And then we end up in this seat of this 12-step meeting that literally has the ability to save our lives. Without a doubt, 100% fact. It has the ability to do that if we take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. But I end up in this seat because I'm too smart for my own good, and I'll outthink myself right out of it. Mm-hmm. And I've seen me do it so many times that, again, on that day that I thought was my worst day, where I'd hit that bottom, unbeknownst to me, turned out to be the best day of my life. And I've had some really amazing days in my life. Because I was so consumed by the mess that I was completely incapable of seeing the message that was being delivered to me from my higher power that, as you said, had already taken place decades ago.
Right.
But I wasn't on that wavelength, you know, and today I am. It's kind of like you spot it, you got it, and I can see it very clear. Right. But then I couldn't see it. So, yeah, it's...
So when you were a kid and you got your first skateboard, you had said that your mom said, I don't know, you wanted to go to sleep with it, right? Mm-hmm. So you have this skateboard. Who gave you the skateboard?
So my sister lived in Ocean City, Maryland every summer. And my mother would send me down there to live with her because she was a single mother raising 3 kids and my father was just insane. And as a young kid, I'd go live with my sister at the beach. And one day she took me to the skate park. She was going to talk to some guy. And I had no interest in skateboarding. I didn't even think or care about it. And at the skate park, the guy that my sister was talking to, who was a professional, but I, for the life of me, can't remember who it was. She has no idea. I really wish I could figure it out. But he gave me a skateboard.
Oh, wow.
And that, right, I believe that we
Such a God shot, yeah.
Literally, I believe that we all possess this God-gifted talent. I know it for a fact. And you could be the best ping pong player in the world, but God might not see fit to put a paddle in your hand.
Right.
That day, God saw fit to give me my God-given talent. And that was, at the moment, I knew that, like, this was what I was going to do the rest of my life.
That's amazing, too. And that, to me, is a deeply spiritually motivated thing. I had the same thing, only for me it was writing and speaking. I knew. I knew it.
So there was no reason for, like, a plan B, a trait, or an option. No.
It's just an inner knowing. And
skateboarding raised me at that young age. And it carried over into literally how I kind of conduct business in my life today is... And recovery, more importantly, skateboarders will try a trick for hours, days, weeks, months, sometimes years. And failure is not an option, right? It is not an option. No is unacceptable. And that's my sobriety. I tried for years and years and years. And I was never the guy that thought that I'll just shoot dope like a gentleman and this is what I'm going to be a functioning heroin addict. I knew better. I knew that either I was going to get sober one day or I was going to die. There was no like happy medium in that. And same with skateboarding. Either I'm going to make this trick, land it, film it, and ride off into the sunset, or I'm going to get broke off really bad. And then I'm going to heal and I'm going to try it again.
My ex-husband was a skateboarder, and he was very much into it, and then stopped for years, and then went back to it in his 40s, and it's quite an interesting experience. But there was something he said to me once about a spiritual lesson that he had in skateboarding, and he said that everything that he's done, he learned by skateboarding. The attitude he needs to have. He said, when you're up and you're about to do a drop and you're about to go in, he said, you have to picture you doing it, you succeeding. You can't have any doubts or any other stories in your mind. You have to completely detach from all of it and just focus. And he said that's what he's done. You know, he became a nightclub DJ and accomplished a lot of stuff in that. And a producer, but it was the same attitude. You have to just be in the zone. You have to be so focused. And so, you know, there's a lot I could see that you learned and in that way, the skateboard was like the thing that, you know, you got to save your life too, you know, because it gave you some sort of structure and healthier direction in some of it.
You will never hear me use the word try. The word try is simply a setup for failure. It's leaving me with enough room to tap out and say, maybe tomorrow, you know, and that comes from skateboarding. Like, I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do this. And actually, ironically enough, skateboarding did for me at a very young age what drugs and alcohol did for me at a later age. And I always share this. I wasn't, you know, because we're all so diverse and different in our own ways, and it's not a one-size-fits-all deal. And that adds to the complexity of the situation, the predicament that we're in with alcoholism and addiction. But I didn't feel like I was less than or lacking of something or in search of this drive, because skateboarding gave that to me.
Right.
So I don't even recall when I, you know, drank for the first time, smoked for the first time. I remember the first time I shot heroin, but the rest of it was just a matter of factly.
Right.
Because skateboarding produced that effect that drugs and alcohol did later.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to ask you that because I feel like it gave you something to focus on, and it gave you something to kind of check out everything else into. You know, like it gave you something to, like, that's it. And there's something very meditational about do it again, do it again, do it again. Like, you know, there's something about that, or even just letting go and going. There's something very, you're totally have to be present in the moment. Like, you have to. Did you ever do it high?
No. I mean, I did, but it wasn't a desired thing. Like, I can't wait to go skate.
Because you have to focus, and that was not going to help you.
It was annoying. Yeah, it was like, that's when I drifted away from it. But when I had that skateboard at a young age, if you would have put me in a room with that skateboard in my hand, you know, I'd believe that if you put me in a room with that skateboard at a very young age, I'd believe that like in a room with all these world's prettiest models, I'll believe that they've been waiting for me and that they're dying to marry me as long as I had this skateboard in my hand. You know what I mean? Like, it would just produce these delusional narratives that fulfilled everything that you know, drugs and alcohol did the same thing later, but it just wasn't
so true. When you were at that pivotal point where you got in trouble with the drugs and alcohol, or the drugs and alcohol, and you were asked to choose, you know, quit the drugs and alcohol or quit the skateboarding, right? That was with like Tony Hawk, right?
Yeah. And
then you chose the drugs?
That's the ironic thing. It's not ironic actually at all, but the reality of the situation is that when I was given that ultimatum at 16, going on 17 to, you know, quit the drugs, go into treatment, save my life, continue to skate for Palo Peralta, or quit the team, just go my separate way. Immediately, without a second thought, I quit the team. And that's at 16. And I had worked my whole life to achieve those successes. And for the first time, someone is attempting to stand between me and my drugs. And that's unacceptable to me. And I gave it up. And that's what's really informative about alcoholism and addiction, is that it's 16, having never had any experience with any form of treatment center, therapists, 12 steps, the disconnection from reality that's already taken place, the abnormal that's already become the normal, is fucking astronomical. It's mind-blowing. And I have no idea of what I'm walking into, the world that I'm about to exist in for the next 22 years, or what the outcome of that insane drug-riddled world's going to look like. Yeah.
It's amazing.
I mean, I haven't even stepped a foot into my first treatment center, ultimately that will end up in 13 later on, but I haven't even went into my first one. And the disconnection from reality that's already taken place as a direct result of my addiction and alcoholism is mind-blowing. That still baffles me.
Yeah, it is amazing. It's amazing how in control we felt like we were when we weren't. It's amazing why I thought I was consciously making decisions and they were being made for me. You know? It's because it does, like you said earlier, that it speaks to me in my own voice, It acts as my best friend, and it tells me what I trained it to tell me. Like, okay,
so
if I should feel this, I want this.
It's not like your voice is going to appear in my head and I'm like, oh, fuck you, stranger danger, get out of here. It's me talking to me in my voice, the thing that I trust and believe in the most, right. Which ultimately is the biggest problem in my life.
Representing everything that I believe, everything that I think I want, offering me everything I think I need in the moment. It's the perfect salesman. And it gets the job done, unfortunately. And so there has to be another voice that I can hear, and there has to be, and I think that's why we are in recovery and we stay in recovery. Like, people go, well, okay, so you're sober, like, why do you keep doing all this stuff? It's because I need to keep hearing the right voice. That's why, because the wrong voice will start to speak to me again, and I'll start to listen.
Totally. The reason I look back, and the reason why I got beat the fuck every time I stepped into the ring with my opponent, meaning addiction, is because I underestimated it. I underestimated the opponent that I was up against for so many years because I was so intelligent that I had it figured out. I could shuck and jive. I could fucking bob and weave. I could maneuver. I could manipulate. I could get around, and achieve that desired outcome. And I was so wrong. I was so wrong that I had no idea. And then today, the reality is the reason why I'm where I'm at and the things that I'm doing and the blessings that appear is because I remain proactive in my sobriety. Yeah. Right. I suffer with that disease called alcoholism, not alcoholism. Right. I don't have the ability or blessing to stay sober off yesterday's sobriety. Right. And today I'm more susceptible to having a drink today than I was when I sat in that 90-day inpatient treatment center. In 2015, without a doubt, because, right, understanding the power of my alcoholism and how it works, and I'm armed with actual facts, it will use today my assets as defects, and it will say, well, you're like a completely different person. You're armed with all this intelligence and knowledge of alcoholism and addiction, and you don't even stay up past 9:30 at night.
Like, who are you now? Don't you even care?
You're a productive member of society. You're a productive tax-paying member of society. You could never get into treatment. You were always homeless. Well, now you own 6 homes and you work in treatment and you have an amazing insurance policy. So you could go anywhere. I could make a phone call and get 20 scholarships. And it will use my assets as my defects and say, well, you could probably, and the people that I surround myself with have never seen me loaded for the majority. And I could have a glass of wine and it would turn out different. And maybe it would, but I know that my stakes are entirely too high for me to roll those dice.
Because it is possible that the first drink, or I could do something and I could get away with it. It is possible. But you know what's so dangerous about that? It's almost like we're here in Las Vegas, somebody going and gambling and making tons of money on their first day out. Nothing happening. That is like the worst thing that could ever happen to them. But they think, oh, they have it. They have something. There's something that they're doing or can do that they have an in, a way, a click, a method or something. And then that's just it. That's all that's needed. So if I should go out ever, if I should ever do that, God forbid, and it's so inconsequential, that is the worst thing that could possibly happen, because I will be chasing that inconsequential experience and using that as the rationale for I don't know how long it would take for me to come back. So it's better to just focus on staying.
And the reality is, it's not even up to you when you come back. And I miss that. Like,
especially with my ego.
That scares me. That terrifies me. I see these people with time. And I'd been in 13 inpatient treatment centers, lost count of outpatients and detoxes, the whole gamut. I had never achieved any form of sobriety. I would go, the most I ever put together was 30 days after completing a 30-day treatment center. And I was angry every day because I wanted to drink wine like a normal person. No solution, no works, nothing. And then, so no freedom. And this was the only time that I have experienced the 12 steps and have found this ultimate freedom and have put together. I've never understood or could relate to sobriety. And I couldn't fathom what that would feel like right now. That would be insane to me. And prime example, I'm in Vegas. I've never placed a bet in my life. I'm in Vegas. It's Super Bowl weekend. I'm from Philadelphia. The Eagles are playing. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and bet. Just because like it seems like it's the right thing to do. Just one time I went and I placed I call all these different people and I'm like, well, how do I do it? What do I do? And like, play the odds, play the numbers. And I'm like, no, I don't want to get caught up. One bet, Eagles win. I bet $500. I lose, right? And my sponsor calls me today and he goes, I see you're really living that Vegas life to its best life. And he goes, yeah. And he's like, thank God you lost.
Yeah.
Because if you would have won,
right.
You'd be like, and halfway through the game, I'm like, why didn't I bet 1,000? I was winning.
Oh, that's so funny. That's hilarious.
No bullshit. I swear to God. I was legit like, why didn't I should have bet 1,000.
That's so funny. And at the end, like, glad I didn't do that.
Yeah, and I assure you, I will never fucking gamble again.
Yeah, there you go. You had exactly the experience you needed. So you have homes and you speak and you do all these things, and we don't have time to get into all the wonderful things that you're so focused on doing today. But what's your website that people can go and check it out?
So but I'm a big fan of. I know we don't have time, but I'm a fan. I'm a big proponent of sober living. That's what really did the best for me. So I decided to open up like a lot of sober living homes, and I scholarship anybody that ever needs help to come to there. I refuse to let money be a deterrent as to why someone can't get help.
Oh, that's awesome.
After completing a treatment. But you can look all that stuff up. My website is brandonnovak.com, all one word.
That's beautiful. And you've written some books, and all that is up there as well.
And I help people get help. So this is what I really like to do. So if you want to put this somewhere, that'd be rad. If not, cool. 610-314-6747. That's my number directly. If anyone's out there and needs help, reach out and let's see if we can figure out a desired destination that I can hopefully help you get to.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, because I could tell that you're super passionate, and everything that you've gone through and the energy you put into everything that you've accomplished, you're putting into now what you're doing now. And man, it's amazing the power of people getting together and helping people, especially people who have been through it.
I love it. I get like high. I always say it, man. Sobriety has given me everything that drugs and alcohol ever promised me, and I legit like get high on these.
It is a high. It is a high. It's the soul high that I never had. No, it's so true. It's just seeing the light go on in somebody else's eyes, or having a personal aha, or having something that was hard before become easy now, and going, oh my God, this is amazing, and just feeling what we've been avoiding and running from with drugs and alcohol. So thank you so much. This was so good, and I love this. And definitely I appreciate everything you're doing. And for you guys out there, the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them, and do not represent any 12-step program, or should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. And you can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, Amazon Fire TV, or you can listen to us on the PHLV Radio app. You can get our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeart Radio. And you can go to themeetingspace.com. It's themeetingspace.com, and click on The Real Recovery Show, and you can see a list of all of our previous episodes. And if you're interested in joining us, click on our intake form on that same page and fill out a form and let us know what you're interested on being on a show, or if you have any recommendations of somebody else. And that's it. I'm so grateful that you were able to do this episode with us. And thank you for joining us today on The Real Recovery Show. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLV Radio, here in Las Vegas. See you next week.